In the previous videos I started my clean chart masterclass where I go through each and every element of clean chart trading. In today's video we're going to look at trend line drawing and all of the ins and outs and things that you should avoid and what not to do. So we're going to start off with a few examples of how you should be doing it, and I'm currently sitting on the old USD chart on the weekly, as I believe the weekly gives you the best trend lines. So the first thing we can look at is we look for wicks of manipulation. So normally they're going to be the largest wicks, and we're just going to pick those out. They are in a nice clean, we've made a nice clean line. You're only needing you need a minimum of 2 wicks. Obviously you can't plot them out of thin air. More is ideal, but 2 is a minimum. And this is an example of an ideal scenario, as we have 2 very nice clean ones that form an outer edge. We do not want anything that makes any form of movement where, for instance, if price had done this, we do not want anything which has a small break. That is not a clean way of doing it. Also, if we're coming from the bottom like this on the bottom way, we can also draw it like so. Often you'll see people drawing them like this, where they get drawn on the underside. This is a terrible way of doing it. In general, you want to avoid doing things like that, especially where you've had breakouts and then break back into the range. It's just not a very nice way of doing it, even though, yes, in theory it is accurate, because you've got 1 and 2, 3, and then even this wick over here, you did have this breakthrough and this wick here, so it's not a great way of drawing it. But the ideal is to have it set like this. You may also find instances where you can draw inner ones, which, okay, and the one I just went to draw doesn't work, but you will probably find ones where you can draw one within another, and I will give an example. So for instance, if you had a few wicks, you could potentially draw one that sits within the other one, and I'm just going to quickly mark on the price action. So for instance, if you had, oops, that was a bit too far. If you had price action which allowed you to come up to this trend line again and again, then you would be able to have both this inner and outer trend line. You'll find that the inner one will break more likely, whereas the outer ones tend to last a little longer. The other important thing to note is that the angle of a trend line dictates how fragile it is. So where you can see these two, if I can delete that, that would be nice. Oh, it's because I'm still drawing. 1 second. The angle of the trend line does dictate how aggressively it will fall apart. So you can see that my bottom trend line and my top trend line here are very, very shallow angles, where if I get to, I'm just going to drop to a daily time frame, just so I can grab this. This is a much steeper angle and is more likely to break, and you will find steeper angles still. I'm just going to draw this because it looks like you'll get one. It doesn't quite line up with the wicks. I was hoping that this wick right here and this one right here would line up, at which point you would get a very sharp trend line, but not quite. And you can see that trend lines that are sharp, if this was, for instance, the case, would have broken quite easily, and this one you'll probably find breaks a lot easier and will then go down towards this lower line, which is much harder to break. So that's just a quick overview on how to draw a trend line. It's very, very simple. You just pick up the wicks, and the way to really choose are find large wicks of manipulation, and you'll just get better over time as you notice the spikes and then draw and connect lines between them and extend them to make future predictions on where price may or may not find dynamic support and resistance.